to see you all. The purpose of today's meeting is to simply, at least simply for those of us listening, to have the revisers walk us through the bills that we have in conference and the differences between the Senate and the House version. So I will turn it over to Jason and or Natalie. Natalie first, and we'll walk through them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you have a few items from us. The first is this stapled chart, and this represents all the bills that are between your two committees in conference right now. So that's what we'll go through. You also have this single page chart, which represents the bills that have passed one chamber, but are not currently in a bill that is in conference before you right now. And then you have a bill brief, which we'll talk about a little bit later, since it was a little too big to fit on this box. So I'll go through the Senate bills since those left the House last, and then Jason will go through the House bills since those were most recently in the Senate. So Senate Bill 75 provides a statutory interest rate for prejudgment interest in tort actions. When that came over to us from the Senate, the only thing the House did was apply that new rule prospectively to actions filed on or after July 1st of 2023. Senate Bill 189 authorizes state and local law enforcement agencies to receive files and information about applicants from other agencies that either received an application for employment or conducted an employment background investigation on that applicant. The only thing the House changed on that was that they changed the effective date to be in the Kansas Register instead of on publication in the statute book. Senate Bill 243 provides requirements and procedures for settlements involving minors. The changes that the House made there were essentially to add a few more sections to increase the cap. So KSA 381708, that's another statute in the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. So we increased that cap there. In KSA 593075, the property cap there in the Act for obtaining a guardian or conservator or both was increased. And then KSA 7449-127 just has basically a reference to a section in the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. So that cap was increased as well. And then House sub for Senate Bill 244, when that came to the House from the Senate, it was a bill related to prosecutorial authority of the Attorney General. The House put those contents in a different bill that's between the Corrections and Senate Judiciary committees in conference right now. And so the House Judiciary Committee took the contents of House Bill 2455, which updates the Kansas General Corporation Code, the Business Entity Transactions Act, the Business Entity Standard Treatment Act, the Kansas Revised Uniform Limited Partnership Act, and the Kansas Uniform Partnership Act. That's the bill brief that we handed out to you all because the Senate didn't hear that bill. So you'll have the bill brief to reference there. So the House put those contents into Senate Bill 244. And those are all the Senate bills that you have before you.
All right, continuing on with the House bills. House Bill 2015 authorizes the designee of an employing agency or entity to petition the court for an order requiring infectious disease testing. When it came to the Senate committee changed the effective date to the Kansas Register, and then on the floor of the Senate, a floor amendment changed the bill to require the petition for that testing to contain a physician's statement that the test results sought are required for the exposed employee's medical treatment. So there were two different amendments made by the Senate. House Bill 2027 creates a procedure to prevent distribution of a decedent's assets to a person charged with the felonious killing of the decedent until criminal proceedings are completed. That's the Slayer rule. And the House recently talked about this one on the floor in relation to another bill, actually, I think. But as introduced, this was the one that instead of waiting for a conviction to trigger the rule, it could be upon a charge or arrest for something that triggers the Slayer rule. The Senate committee made an amendment to eliminate the words "at or following trial" from one of the one of the provisions that require termination of the order. So you'll recall that the order begins from the court, and then there are certain things that trigger the end of the order, and one of them was conviction or other disposition at or following trial. So by removing at or following trial, it triggers the termination of the order at conviction or other disposition, period. So that's the change that the Senate made. House Bill 2065 allows a court to change a spouse's name to a name that is different than a maiden or former name during a divorce proceeding. As it came to the Senate, it left with just a change to the effective date to the Kansas Register. House Bill 2130 is the first bundle that I have the pleasure to talk about. So this is the probate bundle, and you'll note that I mentioned the bills there on the left-hand side, and then also in the Senate version, they're laid out in more detail, but you can have a quick reference for the three bills that are here, 2130, 2016, and 2127. So as it came to the Senate, this was the bill that increased certain dollar amounts in the Kansas Probate Code. Those sections were all retained, so that is all still in here. Those are sections 1 through 6, and then in section 7, the Senate added a provision from House Bill 2127 with a change. So it's similar to that provision. This was the notice requirement. You have 3 consecutive weeks in a newspaper required under the probate code for this notice. And the Senate went back to the current law, essentially, that has a fixed number of days after the order is entered, and changed that from 10 days to 30 days. So the bill as it came to the Senate, 2127, had a period of days, 7 to 14 days, or something to that effect. And that the Senate went back to a more fixed time period of within 30 days. And then the hearing is set between 10 and 30 days rather than the current 7 and 14 days. So if you want to dig into that one, that at least gets you started on the difference. And then sections 8, 9, and 10 are the same as the ones from the other bill. Section 11 is another section from House Bill 2127, again with that same sort of amendment. Instead of 7 to 14 days in current law, it's 10 to 30 days under the Senate change, and the House version had required it just to not be earlier than 10 days. So you have a little different position on 2127 as it's amended here versus as it came out of the House, but substantially pretty close. And then sections 12 and 13 are the same as the underlying bill, and section 14 brings in the provision clarifying how property held under a transfer on death deed is distributed. That's from House Bill 2016, and it is identical to the provision House Bill 2016. So enough probate for me, hopefully for you too. House Bill 2131 then is the bill about the Judicial Council's mission, and the Senate just changed the effective date on that bill. House Bill 2172 is a trust bundle. The Senate added the provisions of House Bill 2172 to the provisions of 2144, or 2144 to the provisions of 2172. 2172 is the Uniform Trust Decanting Act. So 30 sections of the bill is still that Uniform Act, unamended. And then the second, third, and I think I said sections 2, 3, and 4, but it's actually 30 something, 31, 32, 33, that deal with the rule against perpetuities from House Bill 2144 and the definition of resident trust in the tax code from House Bill 2144. So that's where those provisions all came from, and they are identical to what was in the House bill. House Bill 2216 removes the mandatory term of imprisonment as a penalty for driving with a license that is canceled, suspended, or revoked for failure to pay fines. As it came to the Senate, this removed that 5 days mandatory jail time, as you may recall, and the only change was to the effective date, making it Kansas Register. And that is it.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Carmichael?
On HB 2172 and 2216, both it indicates that we were awaiting Senate action, presumably to non-concur in Senate conference. Has that been accomplished, or are we still waiting?
Mr. Chairman, as of the time of preparing this, the Senate had not yet acceded to the request. So the House has non-concurred, but the Senate has not appointed conferees, has not acceded yet. So you're here on all of the other bills. If you wanted to act today, you just couldn't act on these two, but you're obviously welcome to discuss them.
Any other questions? So I'm thinking now that we have this, we call it a day. It's quite a lot of work we put in here. Sarcasm. No one laughed. Thanks, Jason. And then meet tomorrow sometime. I don't know if you guys are good after both chambers recess, and then we can go from there. What are you thinking, Madam Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say there's already a request for a different conference committee immediately upon adjournment of both chambers, so we can do something as, I don't know,
Well, okay.
your
Well,
ideas.
what committee is that with you?
That would be with House Corrections and Juvenile Justice.
Yeah. I mean, could we do it?
10 minutes upon adjournment,
Yeah. Okay. We'll get the notice out somehow, and we'll just meet.
10, 15 minutes after.
Yeah. I mean, as we go through these, probably half are changes in effective date. So I think we could probably agree on that fairly quickly. There's a couple things we might be able to bundle together, and then really there's just a couple issues we need to talk through. So we should get there. Yes, Senator.
And it looks like we will have to also work around 11 o'clock Senate and House Transportation Conference committees for our ranking member on the Senate side. So,
well, so then
at 11 for that.
Why don't we do after we all recess or adjourn in the afternoon? So like if we all go back in at 2:00, we go in right after that. Does that work? That way you can meet with corrections, you can meet with transportation. Instead of in the morning, we'll just take first slot in the afternoon. That work?
Pretty agreeable, yep.
Okay. Beat you to that one. That's it then. Thanks everybody. We're adjourned. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.